Hi, Nick Lowry, and this is Andre Gorin here at Windsong Dojo, and we're looking at the Renzoku series today. We're picking up at the 9th release. The 9th release, as it's called, is actually the first technique that we see in Koru Daiyan. And so it's an inside form. As he's grasping, we're coming up to the inside, right here, right here. And on the action of grasp, we're slipping to the inside and throwing away. Now, there's a lot of variation in this. You can do this stepping backward. Hey! You can do it with a little forward step in and kind of come up his nose and get deep. You can go lots of ways for this thing. But basically, it's a release form that was placed out into the Koru katas rather than kept in the primary release form because of the feature of it being a timing function type of throw, a balance break to the inside, which is automatically more vulnerable to his second hand. Each of the other release forms on the initial point of contact, I have a greater degree of freedom from that, or threat from that second side. But on the 9th and 10th, ooh, I'm inside here. I'm inside, and they do require a little more technical proficiency to make them a dependable function. They are still very useful. The 9th release, we see basic throwaway that we've just described, like from the kata, and it can result in all sorts of different falls. I don't really care whether you flip them or knock them down on their ass or roll them or however you like. The flip's nice. But if he survives that, if he survives it and continues to move through, we basically find ourselves here in a Mayatoshi position, right? So we come up, and just as Yankata Koru Daiyan describes, the responsive form winds up in Mayatoshi. We know from the Mayatoshi actions from earlier, we have the classic Mayatoshi here. We also have Koru Taoshi here. We also have the entire Sumiyatoshi series that comes right off of that same position. Say, hey, looky there. Sumiyatoshi lives there. And if Sumiyatoshi lives there too, well, then the concomitant forms where he's pushing the hand out of his face, they all live there as well. So here, he pushes it out. We've looked at this before, but the one that goes into the forearm, a little deeper past, a little deeper past, they're all right there for you as well. So it's a nice way to find entry to those. In addition to that, from this basic coil, we have the pull back. If he were to run into the object and have the reversal condition happen, or he starts pulling back violently, you have the slipping under issues that we saw about 5. And so we have number 5 reverses from the number 9 condition as well. The 9th release and its basic functions basically have been covered already with the Sumiyatoshi and the Mayatoshi things for the most part. What really gets interesting is when we look at the mirror hand side form, the 10th release form, this one. The 10th release actually gets us into a whole body of work that directly can impact your randori game and has a lot of interesting utility. So first we just do the basic form almost straight out of Yankata. Up to the inside, throw them away. Up to the inside, throw them away, however you like. Then he survives it, and again we have this form of Mayatoshi happening, but this time, let's get closer to the camera again. This time, as this hand is pushed into Mayatoshi, my fingers are down, my thumb is up. If I mirror that with the second side, I can tell you, this is one of the more severe forms of a Koru Gaishi form that you run into. We'll do it real slow. As this pushes through, you wind up crossing your thumbs and being over the top of this wrist, and wow, it's a booger. This one is one of the more severe types of Mayatoshi or Koru Gaishi form from this low position I've ever run into. And you have a Mayatoshi that is basically functioning right off the wrist. Normally Mayatoshi's bumping the body, coming through the wrist, then elbow to the ribs to the hip. This is one that's happening way out at the wrist, right there. And it's a very secure position for your hands. It's an unusual position to wind up with your hands in. So you don't want to be reaching in here and trying to force that to happen. But it does happen to fall into play very naturally right there. Beyond that, from the single-sided form, we have this reversal condition, and back into the interesting Sumiyatoshi stuff. And the Sumiyatoshi series all lives there as well. What gets a little more interesting is when we do a paired hand form. And we're doing the 10th release, and we're doing it on both sides at once. So I'd recommend you try this for just a little while. Just number 10 with both hands. I'm turning out of the way. As we get there, I'm turning to the weak side. And you have what kind of looks like a heaven and earth throw, if you like. There's not a lot of pressure in the hands, not a lot of power. This could also turn into other throws. But basically, when you first begin it, I would just spend a little time learning to rotate on the fly, causing his body to vault up slightly and come to these easy entries. Once you have that going, you might think about what this top hand could do differently. If we think about the first movements of the Big Ten, for instance, this can come to the back of his head. Another bifurcation is this hand can come into his arm or under his arm, and you have a little different throw from the Big Ten. It can wind up down at his elbow, another throw from the Big Ten. And so you start seeing an entry that goes into the first several techniques of the Big Ten, from the shoulder to the head to the underarm to the elbow and down to the wrist, of all those Guruma throws presenting themselves right from the double grasp. Beyond that, we have a few other interesting goodies that you can wind up with. There's the control that comes straight into the shoulders, for instance. So once his grip and power is busted here, you have a free ride. And I'm going to his shoulders. You could go to his face. It's a little more violent, but just touching the shoulders. If you take this same condition where he's gone into this weakness and then rotate at the end and rotate at the end, you can very easily wind up into hand wrapping like we did in number 4. So remember, in 4 we had the 4th release and this hand wrapping idea, which gave us control of the outside of his arm via the closure of his thumb here. Very similarly, hand wrap, hand wrap. And it's important when you start working these hand wraps from number 10 to only do them one at a time. Your probability goes way down if I do number 10 and then try to wrap both. That usually gets more problematic for you. I have a huge degree of facility, though, of winding up with double hand wraps if I happen to do one at a time. So we'll do it real slow. Number 10 release, both sides. I'll turn my center to one hand. As it falls, I let the wrap happen. Now this all relaxes, goes to sleep. I forget about it. I keep my grip, but forget about it, and I turn my center to the second hand. As we move, it begins to fall, and as it falls, the second hand wrap comes into place. You find yourself on the outside of his wrist, on both wrists. Once this has happened, and once you've gotten very comfortable with, oh, I think I'll just pick up a wrist, I pick up another wrist, then you can do all kinds of weird things to him. You can stick his hands back behind him, like Pee Wee Herman doing the funny dance. But more interestingly, I think, is you can cause one elbow to be encumbered by the hand of the other side. And this is a little movement that my teacher Carl made semi-famous. because it's locking basically a hiki-taoshi, or a hiki-otoshi lock that we see in the old 17 kata, but you do it with his own body. From here, you also have the capacity, if you work with it, that he doesn't have to stay here forever. He's not interested in this. This is kind of silly feeling. He can bust out of this, and as he busts out, go ahead.
Which way?
Any way you like, just get out. Yeah, you can bust him back on the other side. So as he resists one condition of this basic function, he doesn't like being here, he wants to get out of this, he has a hard time not winding up in it on the second side. So it can become a sequential problem for him. This is based on the basic understanding that he can do something with one arm or the other, but he has a hard time controlling both. So if he wants to make this bent arm straight, go ahead and make it straight. He has a hard time keeping the other one from not getting bent. If he just, by God, decides to put them both straight, they can both be straight, but then they become vulnerable behind him again. So he has to sort of choose his vulnerabilities. Either this posture becomes compromised, or this becomes a potential, or this becomes a potential. And each time you employ it, here, and here, each time it's deployed, you'd like it to be that your body falls backwards slightly. So as he comes out of this, and as he falls back in, it's as he's falling towards me. I let my arms relax, and oh, there we go, on this side. And I can't predict which side it's going to be, by the way. As he moves away, it could wind up on this same side again. I just know that it's going to wind up on one side or the other, or back behind him. I can't really predict which. Oh, okay, here. Once you have them in a sequence like that, you sort of own their balance function to a remarkable degree. You could just stop here and pick their pocket, step on their foot, decide to nail them in the face. You have a whole lot of terrible options, and they're all available to you for study and further enjoyment. That mostly concludes the overview for 9 and 10. All right. As an addendum in the 10th release, there's also this interesting factor that occurs. I'm attempting to make the double form of number 10 coming up on the inside, and I'm running into the very offensive guy. He's not interested in letting this vault up at all. By God, he's not going to let those wrists go up at all. When you run into the power guy, the advised idea is to drop out from under and control to mawashi right here. So, watch it again. We'll get closer to the camera. I'm attempting to make my 10, but oh, he shut it down from the get-go. He read my mind. He knew what I was about to do to him, and he got here with the mostest. I'm like, oh, I'm stuck. Rather than sit there and try to fight with this, drop out from under, roll the wrists to the outside. I tend to come here with my thumbs. Other people tend to like their fingers here. Some people bring the palms of the hands into place. Once you make any form of mawashi here, you get to be boss again. So I'm not sure that it matters greatly in terms of what your particular preference is. Oh, it won't happen. Here, over the top. Thumbs are nice, pinkies add a little extra power to it, little pain. I'm not a big pain guy. I kind of like just touching it over the top with the palms of my hands because I get the longer, stickier control that way. But you do want to be conversant with the failure condition. Oh, this ain't working. We're going to be here instead. Okay, so mawashi off of the failure of the 10th release is the final piece that I'd forgotten. Thank you. Great.